I watched my mother-in-law set a crystal bowl on my parents' dining table and announce that she had finally found the perfect place to retire. The strange part wasn't what she said. It was that she said it while looking directly at me, like she expected me to agree, like the decision had already been made, like the house belonged to her. I remember the exact moment because I was holding a glass of iced tea in my right hand, and I nearly dropped it, not because I was surprised, because I suddenly understood something I should have understood months earlier. This wasn't a request. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a takeover. And the worst part, she had absolutely no idea that a document sitting inside a fireproof box 30 miles away was about to destroy every assumption she had built her plan on. A single document, 4 pages. Signed 17 years earlier. A document nobody talked about. A document she didn't know existed. A document that would eventually leave an entire room speechless, including her son, my husband. But before I tell you what happened at that table, I need to take you back to the beginning, because houses are funny things. Most people think they're made of wood and concrete. They're not. They're made of promises. And sometimes the strongest walls are built long before the first brick is laid. Welcome back to Reality Drama Story, where family secrets unfold and quiet decisions change everything. If you are new here, drop a comment and subscribe. Now let's get into it. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 37 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if people treated you kindly, you should return that kindness without keeping score. That belief came from my grandfather. His name was Walter. He was a carpenter, not the kind who owned a large company, the kind who spent 50 years building things with his own hands. He built kitchen tables, porches, bookshelves, church pews. And once, when I was 9 years old, he built a treehouse behind my parents' home. Nothing fancy, just wood, nails, and patience. But I loved it. One afternoon I asked him why he measured everything 3 times before cutting. He smiled and handed me a tape measure. Then he said something I've never forgotten. Because fixing mistakes after they're built costs more than preventing them before they happen. At 9 years old, I thought he was talking about wood. At 37, I realized he was talking about people. My parents weren't wealthy. My father drove delivery trucks for nearly 30 years. My mother taught 2nd grade. They worked hard, saved carefully, avoided debt whenever possible, and over time they managed to buy a beautiful house on 5 acres outside town. It wasn't a mansion, but it was theirs. White siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch, apple trees in the backyard, the kind of place people point at while driving by, the kind of place that feels permanent. My parents loved that house, and eventually it became the center of every family gathering. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, graduations. Everything happened there, including the day I introduced them to my future husband. His name was Ryan. At first, Ryan was easy to love. Everyone said so. He was charming, funny, confident. The kind of man who remembered names and asked thoughtful questions. My father liked him. My mother liked him. Even Grandpa Walter liked him. And Grandpa rarely liked anyone. Ryan worked in commercial sales. Good income. Nice clothes. Perfect smile. He knew how to make people comfortable. Looking back, that's probably what made him dangerous. Some people earn trust. Others perform trust. The difference isn't obvious until years later. Ryan and I married when I was 29. The first 3 years were good. Quiet, predictable, comfortable. We bought a small house, built routines, planned vacations, talked about children. Everything looked solid from the outside. Then his mother started appearing more often. Her name was Diane. She wasn't cruel. Not at first. That would have been easier. Cruel people reveal themselves. Diane revealed herself slowly, like water finding cracks in a foundation. She started with opinions, small ones, suggestions, comments, observations. The curtains would look better in another color. The furniture arrangement felt outdated. The guest room needed improvements. Nothing major, nothing worth arguing about. But every suggestion carried the same assumption that she had authority, and Ryan encouraged it. Not openly, not dramatically, just enough. Mom means well. Mom is trying to help. Mom has experience. Mom only wants what's best. I heard those sentences hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Eventually, they became background noise. The first real warning came 6 years into our marriage. My parents invited everyone for Thanksgiving. 31 people attended. I know because my mother always counted place settings. 31 chairs, 31 plates, 31 names. Halfway through dinner, Diane stood up and announced she had started planning future holiday schedules. Then she pulled out a notebook. A notebook. At someone else's house. She began assigning hosting responsibilities. Christmas at her apartment. Easter at her sister's home. Thanksgiving rotating every year. My father listened politely. Then he smiled. Diane, he said, that's thoughtful. But this isn't your decision. The room went quiet. Diane laughed, a little too loudly, then changed the subject. But I noticed something. She didn't like boundaries. She treated boundaries like obstacles. Things to move, things to negotiate, things to wear down. The years continued. Small incidents accumulated, like dust, easy to ignore individually, impossible to ignore collectively. She began referring to my parents' property as the family estate. Nobody else called it that, only her. At first, I thought it was harmless. Then I noticed she said it every time she visited. The family estate, the family estate, the family estate, over and over. Like repetition could create ownership. Ryan never corrected her. Not once. That mattered more than I realized. By year 8 of our marriage, my grandfather had passed away. That was one of the hardest periods of my life. At the funeral, I received something unexpected. A small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Just 6 lines. The final line said, "Protect what your family builds. People value foundations they didn't pour." I kept that note. I still have it. At the time, I thought it was simply grandfatherly advice. Years later, I understood it was a warning. 3 months after Grandpa's death, my father called me. His voice sounded serious. He asked me to drive over alone. No Ryan. No explanations. Just me. When I arrived, he handed me a folder. Inside were legal documents, property records, trust paperwork, signatures, dates, notarizations. I spent 20 minutes reading. Then I looked up. "Dad, what is this?" He folded his hands. Then he explained. Years earlier, after Grandpa's health began declining, the family had created a legal trust. The trust included the house, the land, several investment accounts, everything. The purpose was simple. Protect the property, protect future generations, prevent disputes, prevent opportunists, prevent exactly the kind of problems families often face when money becomes involved. Then Dad said something important. The house will never pass through probate. I nodded, still confused. He continued. There's also a clause. A clause. That word would eventually change everything. The clause stated that no spouse marrying into the family could acquire ownership rights to trust property, not through inheritance, not through marriage, not through residency, not through any indirect claim. The language was incredibly specific, 17 pages specific. The trust had been drafted by an attorney who apparently trusted nobody. At the time, I almost laughed. It seemed unnecessary. Extreme. Paranoid. My father disagreed. He pointed at Grandpa's note framed on a shelf. Then he said, "Your grandfather built houses for 50 years. He understood human nature better than most lawyers." I signed acknowledgement paperwork. The folder went into a fireproof safe. Life moved on. Or so I thought. Then Diane's apartment lease expired. Everything changed after that. She was 66, recently retired, and suddenly obsessed with housing. Every conversation returned to the same topic: rent prices, property taxes, maintenance costs, retirement budgets. At first, I felt sympathy. Retirement can be stressful, but eventually a pattern emerged. Every housing conversation somehow ended with my parents' house. The acreage, the guest bedrooms, the location, the value. One evening, she asked how many bedrooms remained unused. Another day, she asked whether my parents planned to downsize. A week later, she wondered what would happen to the property someday. Each question seemed innocent, individually. Together, they formed a blueprint. Ryan began supporting the discussion. Not directly, gradually. Mom could use more space. Mom shouldn't live alone forever. Mom deserves stability. Mom is family. Family. That word appeared constantly. Family can be a beautiful word. It can also be a crowbar. 6 months later, my parents invited everyone for a summer dinner. 22 guests. Outdoor tables. String lights. Homemade pie. Perfect weather. Halfway through the evening, Diane arrived carrying architectural sketches. Actual sketches. Printed. Rolled inside a tube. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She spread them across the dining table, then began describing renovations. Renovations. To my parents' house. A sunroom addition. A remodeled guest suite. A downstairs sitting area. She talked for nearly 10 minutes. Nobody interrupted because everyone assumed she was fantasizing. Then she said something that changed the atmosphere completely. "When I move in, we'll have to update this section first." Silence. Immediate silence. I counted. 7 seconds. Nobody spoke. My mother blinked twice. My father stared at the papers. Ryan smiled awkwardly. Diane continued talking, like nothing unusual had happened, like moving into someone else's house required only scheduling. That night, driving home, I asked Ryan a direct question. "Did you know about this?" He hesitated. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds. But 2 seconds is a long time when truth should be immediate. Mom's been thinking about options. Options. Interesting word. Not plans. Options. I looked out the window, and for the first time in years, I felt something shifting beneath the surface, like discovering a crack in concrete. The next few weeks confirmed everything. Diane wasn't considering possibilities. She was executing a strategy. She started bringing decorative items to my parents' house. Small things. Candles. Frames. Kitchen accessories. Items nobody requested. She left them behind intentionally, like planting flags. My mother politely returned everything. Diane brought more. Ryan defended her every time. She's excited. She's lonely. She's imagining the future. You're overreacting. Overreacting. Another useful word. People often use it when they want boundaries removed. If this story is hitting close, drop a comment and stay with me because what happens next is something none of them were ready for. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother called. She sounded exhausted, not angry, tired. There's a difference. She explained that Diane had shown up unannounced. Again. This time carrying paint samples. paint samples for rooms she didn't own. My mother finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Diane, why do you keep talking like you're moving in? Diane answered immediately. Because Ryan already said it makes sense. Not might. Not maybe. Makes sense. Decision language. Ownership language. Confidence language. I thanked Mom. Hung up, then sat quietly for almost 20 minutes. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even planning confrontation. I was calculating. The way Grandpa measured lumber. The way Dad reviewed contracts. The way foundations get inspected before construction continues. That evening, I reviewed every trust document again. Every page. Every clause. Every signature. The trust had been established on April 14, 17 years earlier. 4 trustees. 2 successor trustees. Property valuation schedules. Inheritance protections. And 1 specific provision. Clause 11B. The clause nobody remembered. Except me. Except my father. Clause 11B stated that any beneficiary attempting to transfer occupancy rights without unanimous trustee approval would automatically lose administrative authority over trust assets. Simple language. Massive consequences. My parents remained primary trustees. I was successor trustee. No one else. And most importantly, nobody outside the trust had any authority whatsoever. Not Ryan. Not Diane. Not anyone. Legally speaking, Diane had exactly the same ownership interest as a stranger driving past on the highway. 0. She just didn't know it. A month later, she organized a family dinner. Her idea. Her invitation list. Her menu. Her event. 24 guests. 1 purpose. Announcement. I knew it before I arrived. You can always recognize a planned ambush. People become too cheerful, too organized, too confident. The dinner took place at my parents' house. Of course it did. By then Diane already treated the place like future property. The evening started normally. Food. Conversation. Stories. Laughter. Then came dessert. And then came the performance. I counted. Diane said the phrase, our future home, 6 times. 6. Ryan nodded every time. My mother stopped smiling. My father became very quiet. And then Diane stood. She tapped a spoon against a glass. 3 taps. The room fell silent. She smiled. Then announced she was excited to begin her next chapter living at the Carter family property. Applause followed. Actual applause. 5 people clapped. 5. Not because they understood, because they assumed permission existed. Assumptions are powerful. They can build entire castles, right up until reality arrives. I remained silent. Diane interpreted silence as surrender. That was her biggest mistake. Then Ryan stood. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder and said something remarkable. We've already discussed room arrangements. Room arrangements. For a house they didn't own. I looked at my father. He looked back. 1 glance. That's all. The kind of glance families understand. The kind that says the measuring is finished. Time to cut. I stood slowly. No anger. No drama. No raised voice. Just calm. The room quieted further. Then I asked a simple question. Diane, who told you that you could move into this house? She blinked, smiled, then pointed at Ryan. Ryan looked confident for about 4 seconds. Then I removed a folder from my bag. The same folder, the same trust, the same clause, the same signatures. I placed it on the table. The sound wasn't loud, but everyone heard it. Paper can be surprisingly heavy when it contains truth. I opened the folder, turned to the trust documents, then began reading. Slowly, precisely, no emotion, just facts. I explained the trust. the ownership structure, the trustees, the protections, the inheritance restrictions, the occupancy clause, every detail, every date, every signature. The room became very still. Ryan interrupted first. He laughed, a nervous laugh, then said none of that mattered because we were family. Family. There was that word again. I nodded, then continued reading. Clause 11b. Word for word. When I finished, nobody spoke. Not immediately. Then my father cleared his throat, the same way he always did before discussing business. And he said, Ryan has no authority to grant access to trust property. Silence. My mother added, Neither does Diane. More silence. Diane's expression changed. Confidence became irritation. Irritation became anger. Anger became disbelief. Then came tactic number 1. Outrage. She accused me of embarrassing her. I agreed. Publicly announcing ownership of something you don't own can be embarrassing. That didn't help. Then came tactic number 2. Manipulation. She spoke about loneliness, retirement, family unity, sacrifice, past hardships. I listened respectfully, then reminded her that emotional need does not create legal rights. The room got quieter. Then came tactic number 3. Tears. Actual tears. She cried. Ryan moved beside her, held her hand, looked at me like I was the villain. Then something unexpected happened. My Uncle Robert spoke. Uncle Robert rarely spoke. In fact, I think he had contributed maybe 12 sentences all evening. Now he leaned forward, looked directly at Ryan, and asked, Did you promise your mother something that wasn't yours to promise? One question. Perfect question. Ryan didn't answer, because he couldn't. The answer was obvious. The room knew it. He knew it. I knew it. Then my father stood, not dramatically, just steadily, and he said, This property took 31 years of work to pay for. Nobody is moving in because somebody else volunteered it. That ended the discussion. Not immediately, but effectively. The structure had collapsed. The blueprint was exposed. The foundation underneath the fantasy had disappeared. People began leaving. Quietly. Awkwardly. Dessert remained untouched. Coffee went cold. Conversations died. Within 40 minutes, the house was nearly empty. Ryan and Diane stayed. Of course they did. Reality takes time to absorb. Ryan tried arguing again, then negotiating, then apologizing. Interesting progression. First authority, then compromise, then regret. By that point, it no longer mattered. Trust works like concrete. Once it cracks deeply enough, repairs become expensive. Some structures get condemned. 3 days later, Ryan admitted he had promised Diane a permanent place in the house nearly 8 months earlier. 8 months. He never asked, never consulted, never verified. He simply assumed. An entire plan built on assumption. Exactly the kind of mistake Grandpa warned about. The following weeks moved quickly. Family meetings, attorney consultations, documentation reviews, boundaries, consequences. Nothing dramatic, just arithmetic. Within 62 days, Ryan moved into a rental apartment. Within 91 days, we filed for divorce. No screaming, no revenge, just facts. The trust remained intact. The property remained protected, and the people who built it remained secure. About a year later, my mother found something while cleaning. A small crystal bowl. The same bowl Diane had placed on the dining table that afternoon. She asked if I wanted it. I laughed, then placed it on a shelf in my office. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Because every structure tells a story. Some tell stories about what was built. Others tell stories about what was prevented. And every time I see that bowl, I remember my grandfather standing beside a half-finished treehouse holding a tape measure. Measure first. Build second. Simple advice. Useful advice. The kind that works for houses. And for people. Ryan eventually remarried. Diane eventually found a retirement community she genuinely enjoyed. My parents still live in the same house. The apple trees are bigger now. The porch has been repainted twice. And every Thanksgiving the dining room fills with family again. Real family. The kind that understands a boundary isn't an insult. It's a foundation. And foundations matter. Because here's what I learned. People who respect your home will knock. People who don't will explain why they shouldn't have to. And those are very different people. This is not revenge. This is arithmetic. If this story reminded you to know your worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.